We're sitting down with Darren Hill, who's a behavioural scientist, a best-selling author that's helped Pepsi, McDonald's, Suncorp, Siemens, and even the federal government.
You obviously work with top executives. What do you see in the top 1% that separates them from the rest?
Look, it's an interesting one.
There's people that listen to this podcast that have been in a career for 10 or 15 years. If they want to make that change, how do you start that?
If you're finding yourself with a sense of regret, it might be just a calling sign to say, hey, what's the life you should be living, rather than one that you're trying to escape. Hard work, it's the non-negotiable in any success field. Sports, business, focus and effort are going to be the cornerstones to get you there. Drinking too much, gambling, all these things are a really poor coping mechanism for a life not well lived.
If you asked me to tell you what high-wise culture is, I'd say it's high-performing, relentless, and human. Is that any good or is that a bit shit?
Mate, I think...
Well, today we're sitting down with someone who knows exactly why people behave the way they do, and more importantly, how to actually shift that behaviour. Darren Hill is a behavioural scientist, a best-selling author and co-founder of Pragmatic Thinking, a company that's helped some of the biggest brands in Australia build real high-performing cultures. We're talking Pepsi, McDonald's, Suncorp, Siemens, and even the federal government. Darren's been in boardrooms, construction sites, classrooms and crisis meetings, helping leaders lead, fixing people problems and showing teams how to perform under pressure. Whether you lead a team of 3 or 300, this one will challenge how you show up and how you lead.
Wow.
Mate, I'm looking forward to hearing myself speak. After that, I don't know which AI platform you used to generate that, but that was sensational.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in. Like, we're super excited to sit down with you. We've got loads of questions prepped on the laptop here, but I'm keen to dive straight in. You obviously work with some of the top executives in some of Australia's top companies. What do you see in the top 1% of those executives that separates them from the rest?
Look, it's an interesting one because we work across so many fields, and whether it's from heavy industries to primary industry sectors to finance, banking, manufacturing. So across all those fields, it's a challenging question to go, what do the 1%ers share? But the one thing I would suggest, or at least hazard a guess around, is that they believe really strongly in the power of narrative. So whilst they've got a series of skills that are non-negotiable at that level, if we're talking executives, if we're talking people who lead businesses, they've got to know their numbers. They've got to have a strong understanding around the clarity of their strategic vision. They've got to have a understanding around the metrics that'll help them know where they're on track. But I think the 1%ers, what they really get is that every business is a human business, and the power of story and narrative is beyond reproach. It is the thing that mobilises people, because a spreadsheet, and sorry to the CFOs out there, but a spreadsheet doesn't mobilise the masses to give their discretionary effort, to buy in beyond the wage packet, to give more in their 8 to 10 hours at work than what someone else would. It's this fiction that we invent in our head and create a story that people buy into. I think the 1%ers get that more than anyone. They create a great vision, but importantly, a story that connects the people to the vision.
We've had that discussion time and time again, because with our business, obviously me and Ads have this vision and this dream, and it's now we're hiring people. It's okay, we've got to sell or tell the story in such a way that they buy into the dream or the vision just as much as us. And one topic that we covered on a previous episode was whether you think that those sorts of traits you just discussed there are nature or nurture.
I think some people can stumble across them over time and get taught them by their environment. Like I've seen plenty of leaders who'll come in and understand the concepts around business, but won't understand the heart around business and what makes something truly exceptional. Because back to your question, it was about the 1%. So if we take a step back for a second and get quite a statistical analysis on that, if we're talking 1%, you have to be prepared to do things that the other 90% won't do to be in that 1%. Like it's a simple, take a standard deviation and cleave off an amount. Like if you want to get the same results most people do, well, do the same things that everyone else does. But to get truly exceptional results, you have to have exceptional behaviour. You have to do things that others aren't prepared to do. And I think that there's a lot of people when you first start your career, particularly in leadership, where following the standard approaches make a lot of sense. Like it's what most people do. It's how most people expect to be led. But I think to get into that truly rare air, you have to do the things that others aren't prepared to do. And I think for many, that's a discovery along the way. So I would actually contest that there's very few people who naturally get that. And it's only through their own awareness and exposure to certain rare environments that they realise the power of something like an all-encompassing narrative. Like you talk about your own business journey at the moment, and you're in a pretty heavy growth phase at the moment. What will likely start to happen as you sort of crash through that small into medium enterprise business is the power of your narrative and story will actually do most of your attracting. And that's really funny when I speak to a couple of recruiters and go, no, recruiters have got a really important part within this role. But I'm telling you, the difference between when you put down two opportunities to a really high performer and one spells a captivating story and the other one is a pretty clear and easy to understand way that they fit within, that high performer is going to chase that compelling story. They're going to buy into something beyond the numbers. As long as you've got some hygiene factors in play there and they kind of, it's not too disparate between the two, the attractor is going to be the story. Like we're hardwired for that stuff. We want to be part of something special.
We spoke about some of the companies you work with. We actually had to chop the list down a fair bit because it seems you work with every big name.
That makes me sound very old, if anything. Rather than impressive, it's just I've been doing it a while. So.
That was intent. I guess why do you do what you do and why is that important?
Look, I mean, for me, I've always had a fascination with human behaviour. Or when I say I always have, I certainly haven't always. I'll correct myself on the spot, but it seems I've been doing it that long, it feels like forever. But the first decade of my working career, I was a bit of a lost soul. I grew up in a small country town. I wasn't particularly up and about, fair to say. I think the challenge for me, if I unpack it many, many decades on, is I was always quite talented, but my family had never had anyone who'd ever gone to higher education. So it just never clicked for me that was ever going to be a pathway. And so in many respects, the last few years of my school was just a social experiment. I wasn't chasing marks to go on to be anything or do any time at university. So I just kind of meandered, and I think that meandering taught me some poor lessons. So when I finished school, I ended up going to the largest employer in the local area, and that was the local meatworks. So, and just fell into that trap, playing sport, drinking too much, doing that stuff as a kid. And I ended up working in the meat industry for the best part of a decade.
Well,
so yeah, it wasn't until my late 20s that I had an awareness that I genuinely should be doing something better with my time. I kind of had a visceral reminder every day of someone who wasn't living their potential. And the thing was, I was working with people who were tremendously great work ethic, just soul to the earth. Still, some of them are great friends of mine. And here I was sitting with talent and a brain that should have been doing better, should have been achieving more. And so it was about that time that I switched up my career, ended up in hospitality for a while, was running a pub. And then I ended up working for the government. So I was managing a tourism and hospitality college. for TAFE New South Wales. And then from there, I found adult learning, and it was a bit different to school because I could sort of see pathways and they felt more real. And I remember doing a business certificate level, and one of the electives within that was a psychology-based elective. And it was like the sky was bluer and the grass was greener. Like I seen something that I just had a real passion, and it was like I was laying awake at night just thinking about it. And so I just went all in, and as a mature age student, and probably the most painful mature age student ever to have walked the face of the earth, that's a social science mature age student. I headed off to uni and did a behavioural science degree, and just loved every minute of it and just couldn't get enough. It changed my life, and from that point on, working for the federal government and doing a few other things, then went out on business on her own. So it was a very much a meandering path to get to where I got to, but I've been doing it long enough now where it feels like forever. And so why drawn to that field is there's just a deep fascination around human behaviour, but in particular when humans gather in groups. So what is it about us that once there's a collective group of 3 or 5 or 10 or 20, we actually all behave slightly differently, and we all bounce off each other and we react to each other. And what better place to do that when we're in 4 walls in a business context and people have to navigate and work together under pressure. It's as good a case study on human behaviour as you'll find.
It's incredible. I'm keen to really, really dig into that, but I want to rewind to that moment where you said you had that realization of you were destined for more, you had more intelligence than what you were exerting. And I've been there myself, where you have this sliding doors moment and you're like, what am I actually doing with my life? And I know there's people that listen to this podcast as well that have been in a certain trade or a job or career for 10 or 15 years, and they're a bit older. I say older, they're in their 30s, but they want to make that change. Like, how do you start that? Because it can be quite challenging.
Yeah, well, I think for me, it was a combination of a few things where I think I was just engaging in some really unhealthy behaviours, and it's the passage of time and some visits from wisdom. I guess you look back on it and it now makes sense. I didn't have this level of understanding around it at the time, but I was engaging in just some pretty poor behaviours. Drinking too much, carrying too much weight. Gambling too much, doing all these things that were largely, I look back on them now, and they were a really poor coping mechanism for a life not well lived. And so I guess the thing I would say is that if I had the foresight to look at that now, it's when you're engaging in those behaviours, and I kind of knew as much as you can take pleasure out of all of those things, whether it's having a drink, whether it's sitting and, binging a Saturday away, eating pizza, whether it's going and having a punt with friends, or taking drugs or doing whatever. These are all just a coping mechanism, a numbing tool, I guess. And so I'd probably go, if you're finding yourself with a sense of regret around those pleasure-based activities now, it might be just a calling sign to say, hey, what's the life you should be living, rather than one that you're trying to escape? How do you build a life that you don't want to escape from?
That's so powerful. And I think
It's incredible.
That change, it's twofold, right? Because then you decided to study, leave the job you had, then also change your behaviours. So straight away, you've lost your work colleagues, work friends, and you've probably even lost a few social friends as well, because you're not engaging in the same kind of activities. I know we want to speak about the big, beautiful brands we've worked with. I think this is a really powerful part of your life as well. Were there any challenges at that point of making that breakaway, or were you so headstrong where you knew this was the path forward and there was no looking back?
No, yeah. Well, if I could class the climb, and again, I want to make a really important point, is that, and a lot of our clients are, whether heavy industry, primary industries, that kind of stuff, it's just the soul of the earth that country runs on, and all countries run on in some respects, is blue collar workers. So there's no one more grateful and attuned to the hard work that people in blue collar do than me. It was just that wasn't for me. And so one of the things is the change in my career from that industry to a more knowledge-based pathway of work. It wasn't a linear path. It wasn't that I just made a decision and from that point forward, never again, and that I put down a beer and put down a keno or a tab ticket and never played a pokey again in my life, or I never watched another hour of television, or all these kind of other areas that weren't doing me so well in life. It wasn't like I just made a clear decision and that was it forevermore. It was bumpy, and it was figuring things out along the way. And I think what had just changed is the relationships that I started to carry and invest in definitely made a huge difference, because I think, to put it into classic terms, you want to give up smoking, don't go to places where people smoke, right? Like no amount of willpower in the world is going to help you with that. Like if you, so changing your environment, and in some cases, the best way to change your environment is change your job, right? Like it's a really easy way to reshape your behaviour, is go and dare to be different, put yourself into a place and a space. And where you talk about, Harvey, what about people who 15 years in change their career? It's a truck driver who now wants to go to here, or it's a guy who's been on the tools forever and now they're going to do that, or it's the woman who's always been in customer service who decides she wants to move into sales and take the big leap. Well, ultimately, get yourself around people who are in those professions or areas and try and spend a bit less time with the people who are in the current one, because you will always find yourself pull back into that space just because of the relationship and the community that you're in. And that's not to say that they're holding you back. You're the one who's holding you back. It's not their fault. And it's really short-sighted to turn around and blame that environment for your choices. Like, the environment's just doing its thing. Yeah. You're the one who decides whether you want to go in there every day. So.
Yeah, I remember around that time where I was having those struggles and can relate to the bumpy road that you say. I was promising myself for years that I was going to change, and you kind of win a little bit, and then you let yourself down, and sometimes those crashes are even harder than what they were before you were trying to change. I think one book that really changed my life was Atomic Habits by James Clear. And one of the most powerful things he said was removing yourself from those situations. You want to stop going to the pub and smashing beers all weekend. Well, just don't go to the pub. Don't go to the pub and try and drink 0 alcs or Coke no sugars. He's like, you've just got to stop going to the pub.
Yeah, and I think to use Clear's methodology within that book, which has been a phenomenal bestseller for 10 years now.
Incredible.
It's been just consistently up the top, and effectively, a guy who's a great writer and journalist looked at this area and decoded it. The most powerful thing that lots of people take lots of things out of that book. But the most powerful thing, particularly that we understand in behavioural science and lasting behaviour changes, you've got to change the identity. So, and part of that identity is the people you spend the most time with. And I won't go into any trite, you'll be like the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and where they've taken some pretty useful science and kind of tried to clip it up into something. But it's more to do with the environment, and people are part of that environment that you associate with the most will be the greatest reinforcer into your identity. So, as you say, trying to give up drinking and say, well, I'll just go and have a 0 alc with the same crowd. We go at 3 o'clock on the same place to the Burley Pav, or we do that kind of stuff, is your identity hasn't really changed. And that's where we see this tremendous success around run clubs and other things, is that people are buying into that identity, like where we see the recovery labs and these kind of things that people are really, really investing into these days, particularly that generation under 30. It's just been a huge change identity-wise. Lots of people, what's the favourite joke at the moment is, how do you know if someone does cold plunging? Don't worry, they'll tell you.
When you said about run clubs, ads is probably thinking, fuck, Harv's been talking about his running for the last 12 months
but
now.
it's a change of identity, right? Because, if you're now socialising with people in a behaviour that reinforces the person that you want to be, then that becomes a really powerful reinforcer for lasting behaviour change. And so, looping right back is the change from where I am to where I want to be. Well, you have to work out who's the person who sits on the other side of that gap. And the more that you can undertake behaviours that reflect that person, the greater the chance is that that'll stick. Whereas if you sit on this side of it, you don't do any of those behaviours, you don't hang out with any of those people, you don't visit those environments, then it's just going to be a dream. And so that's one of the best things, is go and visit your future self. Like, go and place yourself in that space and place.
I think that ties into ownership as well, doesn't it? And that kind of victim mentality where it's, I'm not this person in the future I'd want to be because I'm from a poor background, because I'm stuck in whatever town I grew up in, rather than actually seeing people who've made the change and then copying their habits, copying the actions they took and getting there as well. I think we, as sports people, or we former sports people, I say now, is being coachable has always been a massive part of our DNA, and being accountable as well, because the buck stops with you. If you're not good enough at under 16s, you don't make under 18s. You're not good at under 18s, you don't make the pros. So I'm not sure whether we've kind of been grilled and ingrained of that's how we operate in business as well, but it really is tough to be around. I'm a D personality type, right? So it's tough for me to be around people who have that kind of mindset. And even we potentially get comments, it's easy for you guys because you're A, B, and C, or you do it together and things like that. How do you break out of that kind of mindset to, I can't do this because, to actually, no, I can do this because?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I think even I'm really sympathetic to both sides of that, or at least empathetic to both sides, is that there's a self-determination is always an important part of success. I think some people can get successful without it, and they just get the rising tide can lift all ships. Like, it's a bit like if you've got, say, one of your clients who's just on a tear, like they're a rocket ship taking off. To be honest, you can be an average performer, go into that business, and you're going to be a star because of the environment, right? So self-determination isn't the single factor for success, because there's lots of examples. I mean, honestly, if you found your way into AI 5 years ago, you could probably be a bona fide idiot and you're still going to have a really successful career, because that environment is just on a run, and you were lucky enough or happened to choose well enough just to be there, right? So there are those circumstances. And equally, on the other side is that there can be people who try their guts out. There is no lack of effort whatsoever, and life knocks them down. There is no doubt whatsoever there are countless numbers of people who, just through luck, ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time and the wrong set of circumstances, who had the cards stacked against them. And for some, it's really easy for us to own for ourselves, and to use that word ownership is to say that I am the central part of my success. But I think it's cherry picking. I think it's actually both. So one, where there are opportunities, you took them, you took some risks, that was great. But you also didn't have certain things that could have happened to you that happened to others. And so all of a sudden we can really believe in our own success and say, well, I could drag myself up by my bootstraps. I did this kind of stuff, things. But number one, if you're living in Australia, you've already won the lottery.
Made it, yeah.
Like when you look at 8.5 billion people on the planet, and look at how lucky we are. If you're a person in Australia without a disability, like, you have such an extraordinary head start on the rest of the population that is living with disability now. And it's way more than what we think, because there's our very obvious disabilities, and then there's the hidden ones and or the ones that aren't as easy to see. And so when you all of a sudden start to ask yourself a series of things, and apply a bit of analysis to it, we can actually sometimes see success-wise go, geez, I got a good hand. Like I could have been a really poor poker player and almost like I thought I was being a genius, but everyone else just had really crappy hands and I had a great one. And so I do think it's part of us backing ourselves, making the right decisions, having some self-determination, carrying some energy, preparing yourself, putting yourself in the right environments, and there's an extraordinary amount of luck that sometimes comes with it. And so I think that whenever we can recognize the fact that there are lots of things outside our control, it actually means that the things inside your control, you can actually do better. And the challenge would be is that for the successful person who believes in that they are the centerpiece of their success is one step away from the great fall from, derived by hubris. And that would be the caution that I'd have, because I've certainly been there myself where I thought that I am the genius. I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm the cleverest person. I got me to here. And you realise that, well, hang on a minute, I'm starting to believe too much in myself. And when I want to take the next step, I know that I'm going to need guidance, help, mentorship, all those things myself. So I think it's a really interesting testing point, is not to give in to the winds of the world completely, but also don't completely believe in our own manifest destiny, that it's actually a combo of the two.
It's a conversation I have with a lot of people when they say, oh, you boys, like, especially people back in the UK, like, wow, like you and Ads have done really well. You've grown so fast in your recruitment industry. And I'm like, yes, we have. We've worked very, very hard for it, worked harder than 95% of other people in our industry. And we've taken a lot of risks that some people have probably gone, you two are absolute lunatics. But I do tell those people there is an element of luck. And the reason being, Adam recruits in construction. I'd say the Gold Coast in particular, probably anywhere in the world right now, probably has the most construction happening. I get to recruit the back office and exec roles for a lot of those companies that are benefiting from that economic boom in the construction industry. So yes, we're good at what we do and we love it and we work harder than everyone else. But if there wasn't 52 high-rises going up along the coastline, it would be a very different picture.
Yeah, we're not that good.
Totally. And timing in business is everything, isn't it? Like you can have the best idea that's 5 years too early or 5 years too late. And you can have all of the will and you can work just as hard, and timing will determine so much of success. Like, think about how many businesses were flying pre-COVID and then just got the legs cut out from underneath them, and how many others it was actually the great accelerator. Now, sorry, but that wasn't your making, right? Like, just because a global pandemic that swept the world wasn't the thing, and the change in monetary policy, all these kind of things, they were far beyond our control. Now, the one thing you can control is what you do, but even that, where we talk about hard work, it's the non-negotiable in any success field. Guaranteed. Like, it doesn't matter whether you're in sports, business, study, family, whichever area of life that you really want to focus on, is focus and effort are going to be the cornerstones to get you there. But I mean, there's lots of people that they can't dedicate 80-hour weeks. It's not because they don't want to, it's because they can't. Like, maybe they've got a kid with special needs. Maybe they just don't have a constitution that can cope with that workload. And people say, oh, well, you just got to will yourself through that. Like, we know people in our lives that some are just really robust and can handle a big load, and others are more fragile. Like, their constitutions under that same workload will melt and fall apart, and autoimmune disorders, all sorts of stuff. So some of us just get a lucky gene where we can actually take on a lot of work. And like, I was lucky enough that I was sort of born into small business. Mum and dad had like general stores 7 days a week, 7 to 7, but that was only the open hour. So you can imagine how long the hours were. And I was just lucky I was born into sure, there was the social teaching of watching mum and dad work those hours, but to be honest, you got to have a certain constitution to cope with that too. And I honestly think some of that is pure genetics, whether you can handle that type of load. And you would have both seen that on the training track as professional athletes, right? Where some can really, you could throw almost everything at them and mentally they'd want to, but they were just breaking down. And others, it was kind of like keep loading them up. They thrive in it. And how much of that was mental and how much of it is their system ability to cope? I don't know. That's the great genetic lottery that sometimes we're gifted with too. So
we have to remember that, don't we? Because I know back in our day where it was so cutthroat in the professional football game in England, and we've played in front of 3,000 or 4,000 people every week, and so we can have naturally high tolerance to pressure. Whereas we have to remember, like even some people in our team, when we're driving them really hard, they don't have that. So we have to be quite mindful. But I'm glad we covered off your story and some of the learns that you had along that story, because how much do you think that's impacted the work you do today? Because I imagine all these executives you're working with, they all have very different stories. Some will have had those challenges, some probably wouldn't. But going through that yourself, do you feel that gives you an edge in the work that you're doing?
Oh, look, I definitely think we're very, it makes the work we do very relatable. In fact, we build our business pragmatic thinking as 3 core principles in the work that we do. We're practical. So we try and deliver outcomes for clients that they can put to work very quickly, as in the next day, that is not too theoretical, that the gap's not too big to bridge. The second one is it's relatable. So in the language, in the ability that it's communicated, that it doesn't feel a leap away, that if we're working with blue collar, it's in blue collar language. If it's in banking, it relates to their terms. So we try and make it as relatable as possible. And the last one's scientific. So we'll often talk about is we will change 180 degrees on a topic area if the data suggests us to. So if this was the belief that we had, then we'll flip 180 degrees if the data suggests so. And some people go, oh, isn't that being inauthentic? Isn't that why do you change course? But the only belief I truly believe in is the belief that we're likely to be wrong. So if we can find better and more compelling evidence, then it's a fool's errand to stay in your lane and not move to there. Now, I think we've gone slightly off track in regards to what the question was. So just remind me of the question again.
Being through that journey yourself, how that's been able to impact the work that you're doing today. Because I obviously appreciate some of these top execs in some of the biggest companies will come from a number of different backgrounds. Some of them might have had a dad who's been an exec and they followed that path. Some of them have probably hit rock bottom to really find that true path.
I mean, truthfully, we have two types of clients who come to us. One, because they've got a problem that they haven't been able to solve themselves, or 2, they're super ambitious and they run from the fear of irrelevance in a really healthy way. So they're going, we've reached here, but we haven't done work next year yet, and we want to stay at the top. And so I don't really necessarily have a favourite around those, because I think they're both really interesting and important drivers. I think for us, because we're androgynous of industry, we just look at people. They don't specialise in a field per se, because I think human problems are enduring. Like we often say that every business is unique in its own way, but we have extraordinary similarities in certain businesses as well. And over 20 odd years, I'd suggest that there's not a lot of unique problems that we come across these days. They're just manifestations of the common ones. And they usually are derivatives of people issues. Like we don't get into capital market plays. We don't get into higher order strategic moves in businesses and those specializations. Ours are more about the people in the business. So we don't tend to specialize in businesses where they're extremely low headcount, high sort of tech style businesses. Having said that, we won a program last year with Jumbo International, who a very tech based business, and that was a Australian. I'm gonna bugger up the title, but it was
Ads does that all the time.
Training program in Australia last year, and they had offices in 3 or 4 countries. very tech-based platform, but it still boils down to how do people lead others? How do those people buy into the plans of the business? And so I think all of that creates a real relatability because you're not specialising too much in a particular field of endeavour. So.
We've been in business for just under 2 years, and the whole world's changed almost quarter to quarter, what we think it is and then what it becomes the following quarter. We feel like we've landed upon quite a clear identity now and a culture.
Yep.
Don't ask me to tell you what it is because it's in my head. I can't say them to words. But a lot of your work obviously is based around culture and leadership, and a quote that I really like was culture is in the moments, not in the mission statement. Mm-hmm. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think one of the first things, let's put a pin in that second question and come back to the first point I want to make, is that 2 years in, particularly as you talk about you've got a culture and you've got an approach, but it's in my head, you need to get that out of your head because there'll be a point in time where Adam and Harvey can't be there to teach people what is right and wrong, what is desired behaviour versus undesired behaviour. Like, ultimately, the team needs to own that. And unless you can clearly articulate that, then you're the bottleneck. And you can't be there to govern that culture. What you've got to do is teach the culture, and then they take over. So in a classic sporting sense, it's when the team holds each other to a standard rather than the coach or the manager holds them to the standard. And so that same challenge will exist for your business now. This 2 year period is been small enough where that they get taught the culture because they get it direct from you. So when you double the number or triple the number or 5 times the number, you can't teach them all. Is there a framework for explaining your culture? Is there certain parts you need to talk to? I'm just trying to think now. If you asked me to tell you what Highway's culture is, I'd say it's high performing, it's relentless, it's fearless as well. We don't make decisions based out of fear, and human is probably one. We're very big on connection. Yep.
Out of 10, is that any good? Or is that a bit shit?
Mate, I think it's really good. I think so. One, you're identifying some of the traits, values, some of the pillars that might exist within there. I think one of the challenges, and again, culture is probably the most discussed, least understood topic on the planet. And it is because we all live in cultures and multiple cultures every day. I mean, you're in Run Club, right?
Ads can't run.
I can't, right? So you're in Run Club.
Yeah.
So it's got its own culture, right? Because anytime we have 3 or more people together, they're culturing. It's a reflex for our species is to start culturing. And you've got your family culture, you've got your business culture. We belong in so many that we feel it, but it's hard for us to explain it. And when you talked about things such as relentless and as high performance and these kind of things, these are some of our marks, and that's a really good unpacking of your culture. But let's take a step back from that even, because what cultures are is they are a set of beliefs, which is fiction. They are stories that we create in our head. They're made up. That is what a company, when it forms, is. It's made up out of nothing, right? We decide you two jokers probably got together and, had a beer or a seltzer.
Absolutely nailed that.
You're good at it. Well, with a podcast named Two Blokes One Business, I'm assuming it was more beer than a lovely Shiraz or a Grenache. So you've had a couple of beers and you invented something in your head, right? Like a story. And so what that story is born of beliefs, and belief, it's a thought we hold to be true. So we repeat it enough that it starts to build some level of concreteness in us, right? So a culture is born of common beliefs. So Run Club is a culture that's born of a common belief. Want to get up early, want to exercise, want to go on a date. Could be a whole bunch of things, right?
Be better than everyone else.
Be better than elite, elitism. It could be a whole bunch of things. And so And what you'll find is even certain run clubs have some of those beliefs will be similar, and then others are quite different, aren't they? Because some will be much more just sociable, and we love having the 70-year-old along, and then others are kind of like, unless you're super hot and under 25, you're not making the grade, right? So they've all got their own belief systems. And then what they manifest themselves in is behaviours. And they're the things we can typically see or hear in the language and that stuff. Your pillars that you described there sit between those two. So what are the beliefs that drive these things, these values and pillars that we want to identify, which then become the behaviours, right? So they manifest themselves in certain visible artifacts around our work, what we can see, the language that we hear, and that's what we become as a culture. And we reinforce it to ourselves over and over, because when we become that as a culture, it reinforces or doesn't reinforce the beliefs. So it's a little bit of unpacking, but in this early stage you go, so why are you relentless? What is it? What is it that you two truly believe in that make relentless a value that we want to celebrate? And then when we look at relentlessness, how does that show up in behaviours that we would congratulate each other, reward, or where are the behaviours where we say that's not being relentless? So it could be we love relentless. So when people take their laptops home, that spells to us that they just won't turn off. Or when someone shuts their laptop at 4:30 and leaves it there, you go, oh, we have to have a conversation about that. Now, none of these are right or wrong. They'll only be judged as such depending on what the belief systems are. So there might be some people listening to this podcast or others in the world of work, their belief system is they're not about relentless, right? So the fact that I would take my laptop home and send an email at 9:30 at night doesn't match my beliefs. I don't believe in relentless at work. I believe in having a bit of a go. I believe in doing a really good job when work's on, but I'm not sure what you code relentless as. What I'm curious about is, where does it come from? And then how does it get expressed? And then when it gets expressed and you have a bunch of people who believe the same thing, that's where you get this self-reinforcing system that is culture.
I think it stems from winning. I think that's where it is for us. Obviously, our background, it was all about winning. You know, you could have the best game in the world, but if you chuck a goal in the 90th minute, I'm a goalkeeper and we lose 1-0, it doesn't matter what's happened. So I think it's that pure outcome-based feeling of winning. And I think that's where we bleed it into the relentlessness, because recruitment is a hard gig. You get kicked in the face every single day. And it's that ability to keep bouncing back and just keep moving forward. And the behaviours where we probably say, okay, that's not portraying relentlessness, is where you lose out for whatever reason. Someone accepts a job and they change their mind, because as you know, they're humans. They change their mind. They're unpredictable. There's two options you can kind of go with from there. You either sulk, take that victim mentality of, it's their fault, this, that, and the other. Or one thing that we've implemented is we say, did we do everything we could have done? If the answer is no, what didn't we do and why didn't we do it? And let's make sure we do that next time. If the answer is yes, we did everything we did, okay, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go and be relentless and find another person for that job, which ultimately then you're back to winning. I think that's probably where it comes from me. I think
breaking it down, winning's not even the end result. I think winning is that micro step throughout the way as well. So it might be this phone call I'm going to make to Darren because I know he needs to hire an operations manager. I'm going to win that call, which means the second outcome is going to be the meeting. I'm going to win that meeting, which means we've got terms agreed, a timeline, a plan, a really good brief. And then the next one is we're going to win the shortlist. We're going to have you 5 people. You're going to meet 3. So winning the micro steps, I think that's the buzz for me. And just moving things along. And of course, the end goal, the financial benefit's fantastic. But I think as we have grown, and I always get a bit hesitant because I sound like a bit of a knob when I talk like this, but the money kind of becomes secondary. It's really the feeling. And when you've got a certain amount of money on the board or the financial targets for the business have been hit, we're not the kind of people to then take the foot off the gas just because financially the target's there. If there's 5 clients we're working with, every little micro step across every one of those clients has to be won. Otherwise, we've lost.
And it's winning for the clients as well. So when we place a senior executive, like, as you know, they can have such a huge impact on some of these businesses. And you call them a year later and you're catching up on what's Dave, for example, achieved in the last 12 months. And they give you a real tangible result that person's achieved that you found for them. Okay, I'm winning for myself, but now I'm winning for you as well. And I think that's the feel-good dopamine that, as you can tell, we're getting we're getting revved up about it now. It's just that's the relentlessness.
I think it's interesting to hear you play that out a little bit as you're going on a bit of self-discovery around some of these things that you find really valuable and where those beliefs come from. I'd contest winning as being a core driver. And I think you, Adam, checked Harvey slightly in that conversation around that one. Hang on a minute. Is it about winning? Because you know that in the business, it's a lot of losing to get a win. Like it's a lot of knockbacks. And whilst you can learn from those knockbacks and turn them into a win, winning and relentlessness, it's funny because if you really value relentlessness, it's actually about struggle. So deep at the heart of being relentless means bring on the challenge. Like it's not about give me the easy pathway. Where's my hack? Well, how can I do this and turn it into the 4-hour work week? And I get that sense from you is that there's a real sense of pride of the long hours, of the challenge and the struggle versus the easy pathway out the other side towards victory. So it's not really victory that's the driver. It's probably more the journey and the struggle. And in your game, I'm sure you have conversations and go, hey, how do we go? We missed that one. What did we learn? How do we improve? There's a lot about progress that seems in your language there too. How do we get better? And how do we improve and how do we go to another level rather than necessarily have to win? And that would be my little test case here for you, actually.
He's good, isn't it? You got us.
So if I put this question to you is if you had the choice between a win and a choice between a loss but being better out the other side of it, which one do you take?
It'd be the loss because the win, the dopamine wears off pretty quick. But the feeling of progress.
Yeah. Because if you win and you don't improve, it means you've got to stay at that level, right? And you may be able to win again. But that would be my choice is that if you were faced with the binary choice of these two values of one winning and the feeling of winning, which is glorious, right? Like it's all time, or the challenge of struggle and a loss, but you're actually better out the other side of it, which one would you choose? That's a good one to reflect on.
You've hit the nail on the head, right? Because the reason we started this business, we worked in a really well-established recruitment agency, and there are a lot of recruiters out there that don't operate in the best interests of job seekers or employers, and that probably correlates directly into the winning. It's all about just that win. They don't become better in their process, but the underhand tactics can still generate that win. One thing that we've become absolutely obsessed with here at Harwell is enhancing that process, both for the employer and the job seeker. How can we give them an absolute world-class experience? And like you said, that doesn't always come from winning. And even when year one, we did super, super well, just me and ads, and then we added a couple. But even now, we've just completely rewrote our process because the world is changing and times are changing, how we can keep getting better and better. So I think moving back to that pursuit of growth that you picked up on, I think you've got us to a T there.
Well, it's interesting because when you couple, and remember that all values, they need to be governed by other values, right? All values in their essence are pure, but they can become weaponized. So let me explain. Let's take a value such as family and belonging, right? At its purest essence, it's a beautiful, pure value. When you look at it at surface level, you go, how could that ever be a bad thing? That someone has a deep value around family and belonging and wanting to be a great contributor to their family, serve their family, and belong to a great family unit. Take a parent who exhibits that value, and in a hierarchy of values, it's number one, top of the tree, right? So let's take mum who's 35 years of age and she lives that value as the dominant true north in her life. Now, at its purest essence. It looks pure. But then what we see is that unless it's governed by other values that keep it in check, what we can find is that experience, and an all too common experience, is that mum at the age of 45 or 50, who's let that value and no other values kept it in check, who turns around at the age of 45, 50 and says, who the fuck am I? Right? And it's much the same as, and I'm using some classic stereotypes, and of course that could be the dad as well, but it's like the executive, a female whose value of achievement's great value. Like, who wouldn't want it? It's a great rocket fuel for our lives, and particularly in the world and society we're in. How can it possibly be too wrong to want to achieve and be better and do those kind of things? But if you give in to nothing other than that value, again, the same thing will happen, is that there'll be this crisis at a point where they go, who am I? And so all values need to be governed by each other. And so when we talk about those values such as relentlessness, what's it governed by? And those things are some of those other values that you talked about. It's talking about the tension between the values. So to be relentless, but do it in the service of bettering the industry, it's a great counterpoint, isn't it? Like whereas if it's relentless to just win at all costs, you're not going to further the industry. You're going to burn people out. It's going to be a short, sharp rise and then a spectacular fall. But if what we're building alongside is a bedrock of customer experience and changing people's careers and lives for the better, that's why we're relentless. They can be governed with each other well. And some of the others, my memory can't quite remember some of the other statements that you made.
Fearless would have been one, human.
Yeah, fearless and human, those kind of things. These are a network effect when we take those things, and their idea is that they should have tension points between them. They should challenge us that we don't go all in on one more than the other. And so that's a good thing to remember too, because any value on its own can end up being quite destructive over time. Even the purest and the most beautiful of values, they need to have others that create a healthy sense of tension across them. And then in that culture, talking about those values and how they affect each other. And because what you'll find within your culture too is that people will weaponize the things that you hold pure if there's interpersonal conflict. So you could have a team of 15 people and one of your stars who just doubles down on relentlessness. They just turn into a proper asshole.
But you told me we're relentless.
But you said, well, we're relentless, and Sally is going home for a kid's graduation. Like, that's not relentless.
Yeah.
Like, and you're just going, hang on a minute. You're not taking the full picture in, and where we talk about the value of human, where we want to build a place where, Michael can go and attend and sit alongside his wife who's going through chemotherapy. We want to be a place that he feels the ability to go and sit and hold her hand for 4 hours to do that. That's being human, but it's not giving up on the value of relentlessness. And so that's why we've always got to have the conversation across the spectrum of our values with our people, not just one or two chosen ones, because they end up being weaponized for individual purposes. And that's not what culture is, right? It's a governing of accepted norms rather than it's just one person going, I'll cherry pick that one here and I'll beat everyone around me over the head with it. So.
Yeah. Can we flip that back on you? Because you've obviously co-founded Pragmatic Thinking. 3 times, I think you've appeared on the AFR Top 100. Along that journey, has your leadership style or values changed as well?
Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the show. Now, why I got your attention, apart from being professional podcasters, we also run a recruitment agency called Behavioural Consulting.
Yeah, we're super lucky that we get to partner with some of Australia's most well-known brands and biggest organisations. So if you're keen to hear a little bit more about how we add value to their teams and businesses with the right people, we'll put the links in the show notes, or you can check us out at www.behavioural.com.au. Now enjoy the rest of the show.
Massively. Yeah. Like we had our early days of particularly lit up by vision. We wanted to really achieve something. And again, some of those stories that drove our business to that 3-time AFR Fast 100 listing was very much about who we wanted to become, and we had a group of people who really wanted to come on that journey, and it was a rocket ship. It was a hell of a ride, and I think at that time you're adopting the persona, whether it was intentionally or unintentionally, around being a story weaver, around lighting people up in the pursuit of doing something that was really cool. But over time, what you find is that it's really hard to sustain that power without passing it on to others. And I think these days, just because of stage and phases of life, not necessarily chasing the moon that I used to, like I find more pleasure in working with clients around things, and particularly some of our longer standing clients. So some clients that I've worked with, I've been working with for 15 plus years now. They go on to different jobs, and I'll get a phone call saying, "Hey, I'm here, give me 6 months and let's talk." And it's a great pleasure being one of their sort of secret weapons, if that makes sense, or one of the things that they, you know, that you've been a big part in their career as they've gone from step to step to step, and you know that it's a great feeling to be of service to them as they walk into a new place charged with change, and they know that they've kind of got you as a resource in their back pocket. So I think that that's certainly changed from the early days, where to build enough infrastructure, to build enough service delivery was very much about building a business, bootstrapping it from day one up. And now I think we've built a very experienced team that knows their jobs inside and out, and we don't actually have to lead them a huge amount. Like it's pretty easy, to be honest, because they know what they're doing, they're passionate about what they do, so don't feel as though you have to take a group of undiscovered people and mint them in a version. There's enough muscle memory and story within the business to do that well.
You referred to the journey as being on a rocket ship, and you lit up as you were speaking about it, which I love, because we often say, you know, we feel like this is a little mini rocket ship at Harwell.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you really regret from that journey?
It's funny. What's the meme with the guy who's got the no regrets tattoo? That's certainly not that guy, where I also don't buy into the trope of where people go, I don't have any regrets, it's all part of it, blah, blah. I've got tons of them, tons of regrets. My regrets, and I don't know whether this is just a clever way of you asking for any particular advice on someone who may have been through it before, but I definitely feel like if I had the journey over again, if there were things that I could undo or do differently, I would focus much more on core principles. So I think what you've got are values and narrative, which are an incredibly powerful force. In fact, right back to your very first question, what's the 1%er? The difference between the business that goes on an absolute tear and the one who just middles will be the power of the story. Or that, you know, it could have been pure innovation around something created, but most of the time it's actually the ability to unite people together under a story. So that's what the really 1%ers, the great growth stories do. But I think the great fall for a lot of them is where they don't invest hard enough into core virtue principles in business. And these are, so the difference between a value and a principle. So a value is something that we have a preference for and a priority that we place on it, right? So with, back to our conversation, relentlessness, we value it. So we go, we prefer to have it, and we're going to make it a priority. That's why it's a value. A principle is something that is a time-honoured truth. It's something that doesn't really change because it's proven over time to keep working. So the principles that I'm referring to are core business principles such as conflict of interest, confidentiality, to act with fidelity, safety. These kind of things are being proven over hundreds of years really in business that they just work, and you're not too smart to apply them. Like, as innovative as you can be, these are the things that when you get them wrong, they bite you in the bum. And I think that if I could have wound the clock back, I would have just as heavily spent time on the growth story and the narrative, but also around core principles that business is built on, and helping people understand that as much as we can get lit up by these things and we can see those wins and we can kind of celebrate in that success, that it never comes at the cost of these things. And so, I mean, even back to some core principles around how you run your finances. Like you can be a really smart business, but you can't outrun your numbers. You can be a really smart business, but if you hire and fire people incorrectly, you're going to end up in front of some people who are going to whack you for it.
Yeah.
And so there's certain things that it doesn't matter how smart you are, you're just not going to outfigure because they're time-honoured truths. I think that one of the things in a relentless culture, and I know we're potentially overusing that word, it's just one I've grabbed onto because there's a lot more that make up your culture than that. You got to be careful of people and your own ability to handle relentlessness. So it was interesting. I know a great mate of mine, Nam Baldwin, was on your podcast.
We love Nam.
He specialises in relentless people who need to actually relent. So you can't be just relentless all the time, because the human system, as much as you might have a great appetite for work, right up until the point where your system's going to go, we're done. And whether that's burnout, whether that's emotional burnout, whatever else it is, it's a recognition that, hey, we run on a biological system, and as much as you might will yourself towards it, at some point we just know through science that that's not going to last forever. So it's probably better off to start to take care of it now. So I'd probably, long answer to the short question, my regrets would be that I didn't pay enough attention to core principles in certain areas where you're not too smart to figure out the things that have stood the test of time. So they're probably worth just as much a look as what this incredible story is that you're creating too.
I want to dive into AI in a minute. I've got a kind of a question for you. That's relating back to what I do in terms of construction recruitment. If I'm running $100 million a year turnover building company, and you've got all the stereotypes, bit brash, bit rough, big personalities, blokes on site in 35 degrees, they've got to a level now. They've been at that level for a while. How do they then, if they feel they need to, change that culture across the organisation, which has, again, got so many different personality types in, from your exec, your CFO, down to your labourer on site and everyone in between? I guess first off, do you work in that kind of sector with clients you work with? And what's the journey for a company like that to actually improve, enhance and transform the business culture?
Yeah, well, I mean, this will sound like a really simplistic answer to a really complex problem, but the only way that that's going to change is if that core influencer changes. So we've been bought into countless businesses that were founder-led, and those founders are a rare breed, right? Like when you're hitting the profile of the business that you're talking about, where they're $100 million business, there's just this charismatic individual that's just extraordinary. Like that, what they've been able to achieve is incredible. But then all of a sudden, all the pain points of what they've created start to turn up, and they've got enough people who say, we need to change some stuff here. There's things here where we're staring at the edge of a drop-off, or where the risk is getting greater, or we're really worried about the future. Ultimately, the person who's pulling the biggest levers, the way that you change the culture starts with the person changing. And so, first of all, if we come right back to our conversation around culture, well, what beliefs have they got to change? Because where you'll often find is, say, that charismatic leader of that organisation, they turn around and actually realise through pain that there's some things I'm going to need to change. So all of a sudden they go off and they do a course, or they see something, or they're looking at TikTok, or they're doing whatever. And then they come in and they go, right, so here's what we need to do. And they introduce a behaviour. But guess what? Because the beliefs haven't changed, the behaviour lasts. Like, you can set a clock timer on how long the behaviour is actually going to stick around for, or how long they'll commit to it. Because what they haven't done is change the belief. And we go back to another part of our conversation around identity change for habit formation, for it to stick around long enough to take effect. You've got to change who you are. And so for that charismatic, impressive individual who's achieved all that success, who's got the trappings of success that reinforces to them every day how amazing they are, they actually might have to realise that they're the one that's got to change, not everyone else. And that's where we can often find is they're trying to change everything else, change the team, change this, I'll sack a few people, I'll bring a few other people in. But have they genuinely changed? That's the big question.
In that instance where, you know, a company of that size, that profile, 100 million turnover plus, you obviously have a founder, but you at that level, you should really have a board of execs.
Yep.
Who brings you in? Is it the founder that brings you in, or is it the execs?
Oh, well, in that kind of profile, generally it'll be the execs who will bring you in, but whether you can actually get the trust and the buy-in from the founder will largely determine whether we're having a very quick meeting with them and saying, see you and good luck, love what you're doing, but not for us. Or whether you've actually got the buy-in. Because the execs have been bought in often, so some, and in that kind of classic profile, some of them have risen up through the ranks. They are the acolytes, they understand the culture because they've lived every part of it. They've been successful in part of it, and that can be one of the great challenges as well, because the founder plus these early stage employees who've risen up, they've got drippings of winning attached to this thing that they love, right? And they'll be very passionate about it. But they've brought in expertise along the way who go, we've got some problems we don't know how to solve, so we're going to bring people in. But then what can happen is if those people who are in from the start aren't willing to change, what tends to happen is you'll have this exec group where it's almost like they're a little bit at war with each other because one's trying to embark on change because they're worried about the future. The other one's worried about the future, but they see that we're not being who we were, when it's actually we've got to become who we need to be into the future. And so we often get brought in by the exec because they're worried about the future. They've been chiefed and tasked with changing for that. But unless that founder and those longer term executives have a genuine want to change themselves, we'll typically tend to say, this one isn't for us. Because it's a waste of our time and theirs to try and get buy-in from someone who's not willing to change themselves, that it's someone else's problem. And again, we're making lots of connections to other parts of the conversation, but where we talk about self-determination, like it's my responsibility versus the collective group, and that I live in a system, the person that is truly drunk their own bathwater around I am the single point of success for my journey is also the person who won't change. And so it got them to there, but it's not going to get them to the next part because they're the ones who need to change. And if they want to change the culture, if the culture's got to somewhere where they're not that happy about it, they've got to be willing to accept that the culture's outgrowing me. And so I need to make some changes too.
Or bring in a general manager or whatever the decision is and step away from the business.
Well, that can certainly help where they'll move into board roles and they'll get out of the road. But again, that'll probably need to be driven by who they need to be, because I've also seen that happen where that's the time-honoured pathway is right. This business is beyond me now. It's time for me to step out. I'll go on to the board, but they haven't really changed their identity or haven't found that thing that they want to be or become. So they just end up being this horrendously destructive board force that really is just a CEO just without the title anymore, but they've got all the power. They've still got the voting block and the shares. You're kind of going, oh, you just made it even tougher for the business in some respects. So go and find some interest. Like go and create a new part of your identity that you can go all in on the same way as you went all in on your business, and try that for a while. And then come back and be a better balanced version rather than just one where my identity is this business, and just because I took away the founder you never take away the founder tag, but took away the CEO tag and now I'm the board member. I'm basically still just the CEO of the business. I just don't do payroll anymore or don't do the hiring and firing, but I'm a tremendously destructive force in some cases.
I'm going to hand you over to Ads because I know he's got some big AI questions he wants to delve into. And I think as a specialist in human behaviour, you'll have some great input on this.
Yeah. Again, one of the podcasts you spoke about you're an early adopter, which is great. But you said it's never going to do your job for you, right? It's going to be almost like an intern, I think is the way you described it. I guess what's been your journey with AI from 5 years ago to now? It's very mainstream. We're probably 6 months into the journey, if you like. We were training ChatGPT to understand how Adam speaks, how Harvey speaks, what Harvard does, what the podcast does. And we see it being almost like a board. And what I mean by that is this is my problem. This is what I'm going to tackle it. What have I missed? What can I not see? What's your experience, ChatGPT, in dealing with this? As weird as it sounds. Yeah. Are we on the right track? And I'll probably flip it over to you in terms of what you've done from 5 years to now, how you utilize it best, and maybe give us a couple of pointers on what we can do too.
Yeah. Look, I mean, the one thing I would say is that I don't have any expertise in artificial intelligence. I'm just a really curious observer around how workplaces and humans are interacting with what's incredibly disruptive tech. So a couple of things, if we follow the passage of time and disruptive tech, is we completely overestimate the impact that this technology is going to have in the short term. So we think it was only 12 months ago we were going, it'll be the end of our species. We'll be, it's Skynet revisited. We're all going to be in massive trouble, blah, blah, blah. It hasn't happened. Won't happen. By the way, apocalypse belief systems, they've been around forever. It was a really important part of our biology was existential threat, because it used to be once upon a time we were a small tribe, this smallish primate that wasn't strong, wasn't fast, and the only thing it could do was cooperate really well together. Then that evolved to the point where we could actually start to invent stories, which made it powerful, because instead of us having to go down to the riverbank and watch one of our people get torn apart by a predator and go, we shouldn't do that again, you could actually paint it on a wall and teach each other it. And so us being able to invent story allowed us to be able to create this incredible space where we were able to grow beyond our small tribes and form communities and civilizations and cities and all that stuff. Is our ability to believe in an idea is why we created capitalism and business and communism and all these, and why we go to war and why we, have peace and all these things, is we believe in things together, right? So along the way is we had to believe in existential threat when we're in those small tribes, because it could be the end of our species, right? When we started to build civilizations and all of a sudden food started to get taken care of and safety started to get taken care of, we never lost that threat that something might come and take over our lives. It was ancient Greek gods. It was, we replaced that. Like even in my lifespan, I remember, so there was an AIDS epidemic that was going to take over the world. There was Y2K was going to shut down the world. There was kind of like COVID, COVID, like we could go on and on and on. AI's just been in another 3 to 5 years, about once every 3 to 5 years, there's another big existential threat that'll take over the world. So AI, in the short term, it's not going to be as disruptive as what we think, but over time, these big disruptive moves shape the world way more than what we imagine. So I think in 10 years' time, we're going to look back on AI and go, holy,
we didn't know what we didn't know.
Didn't know what we know. It's the same as the internet, right? Like it was the same with the invention of the smartphone. We did not anticipate, like in the early days, you go, this is going to change everything. Anyone who's close to it goes, oh my God, this is going to take over our lives. It didn't in the first year or two, 3 years. But then you look back over the passage of time and go, the disruption of it was incredible. That's going to happen with AI, like mainly because of the adoption rates and the data on how fast it's getting adopted. This thing's a runaway train. It won't change our lives significantly in the next 2 to 3 years, but over a 10-year period and a 15-year period, it's going to be extraordinary. Now, I don't have a looking glass to look into the future. Predictions, particularly around futurist stuff, are fraught with danger because no one really gets it right. So I don't really have any particular advice around what big moves that businesses should make other than the one, and that is experiment. Experiment heavily. When it's that disruptive, it is the early adopters who have the advantage. There's going to be moves that are made for business that are well beyond your control when it comes to AI and how it affects businesses. It's just going to set new rules of the game, and then it's up to us to play the game. Now, the one thing that I know is that there will be people that are much more familiar. They get the language, they get to understand AI and the use of it. The jump into the new world is going to be so much easier for them. And it's the ones who resist the change who find themselves way back and find themselves irrelevant. So I would be at a small level as a business of any size at the moment is investing in the curiosity of AI. Take it for a run. See where it breaks. See what you can use it for and what you can't. And along the way, what you're actually doing is earning a bit of a PhD in it, right? You're learning through firsthand experience what it is. And we know that the technology that exists today, where it's going to be in 12 months' time, 2 years' time, and 5 years' time, are light years apart. It's moving so fast. But you've got to start the base blocks of interacting with it. And so if you're a business and you're not playing with AI now, you're just falling further behind. It's too disruptive. It will affect every industry. But to what level? I'd want to be a decision maker who's got a lived experience around it rather than someone who has to ask someone else to look into it because you have no idea. So I'd get your hands dirty a lot.
Yeah, we're definitely experimenting with it, but where we've tried to, I guess, direct our efforts is how do we create more efficiencies and save time on our back end so we can increase our human interaction and provide a world-class service. So things like AI note takers that are specifically for recruitment agencies that plug in so we can give you our full attention when we're interviewing you, or even like note takers within our meetings. So that's what we're toying with. Ultimately, to create an environment where we can probably create more output with a team of, I think, 6. I think we're probably hitting numbers that were 3/4 of the way to what we were hitting in our old agency with an office full of 25 people. So that's where I feel it's going to affect our business and, some of the larger businesses. I'm speaking to CFOs every day that I fear for accounts officers at that lower level that are heavily based around data entry because AI is now punching in invoices. AI is even doing reconciliations. So in some of these large organizations, they have teams of 20 people doing that. So I think it's going to be disruptive in the sense of those people are going to lose their jobs. In our industry, it's still based heavily on that human interaction. You can put resumes into ChatGPT and check it against a job brief and it will tell you the correlations, but we know that from reading it. It's the depth of questioning around that person's journey, their beliefs, and why this company could be so right for them. That's what AI can't do. And I don't know, maybe in 5 years it will, but I can't see it ever getting to that stage.
I think, and this is a really interesting thing, is that when we think in terms of technology, right? Technology gets really confused around what it is, but it's just simply a tool to help us get the job done. So this microphone's a form of technology. The pen that you use is a form of technology. It's just a job it's a tool we invented to help us get a job done. Now, I think that AI is simply a technology, a tool to help us get a job done. And the clearer you are as a business on what you stand for, back to our previous conversation around the pillars that we build on, run your experiments with and your usage of AI through that lens. Because it'd be really easy to go, hey, we've got this and this is going to save us money or save us 2 people headcount. But if that makes the customer experience, because it sounds to me that one of your core pillars is around revolutionizing the experience that our customers have, then you employ AI to help you with the experience. Whereas you can certainly find some businesses where they want to provide a low-cost alternative, right? And they will use that same tool in a different way to reduce costs. And so people might go, we don't want the care, we don't want that stuff. We just want a service and we want to pay the least amount possible. Well, if that's your value, AI can help with that, but it's a piece of technology that we need to put to work to help the vision that we create in our business and the values that we hold true, run it through that lens. And that's your great challenge as you grow too, because you got to make sure people understand what you stand for. Otherwise, they'll come in and say, why are we doing it like this? Why don't we use AI? But it might rip part of the soul out of the business. And that's where we can get into a challenge on that too. So use AI to embolden your values and what you want to stand for as a business and strengthen those, but don't use it to replace the things that make you who you are.
That's a really key takeaway for me, is keeping the core, the values, the principles, the culture as well, and adding to that rather than replacing it. Because I think you could theoretically do the full recruitment job on AI. Low cost, probably low value, but some people want that. And on the flip side, you can do it all as we have done traditionally, right? All face-to-face contact. There's definitely a middle ground where more FaceTime and actual communication you have in person with your client, rather than sitting there typing up the job brief and sitting there sending out big long emails. That's where the money comes. And I think it goes further than that into what fills your cup. And luckily for me and for Harvey, meeting clients, meeting people, building connection, that actually is what fills our cup. And funnily enough, it's also the things that makes us the most money as well.
Yep.
So whatever we can do to get rid of some of the backlog of the admin heavy stuff and then do more of that, one, hopefully we should build and grow as a business, but two, we actually have more fulfillment and passion in what we do as well.
I think one of the things too that, and this is advice rather than, this is opinion rather than advice, is I think particularly the profile your business is at 2 years in, the more you can be really open around where and how you're using AI with your clients is a real differentiator. Because if you think about bigger established recruitment agencies that might be employing, they're using it in the back end to save some costs, most likely. Now, some of it might improve some of their systems and processes, but I think it's really on brand for a 2-year-old business that's on a growth trajectory, is figuring out the new world, to say, hey, we're going to talk you through our model and why we think we're a great offering. And I want to also talk to you about what we've discovered and how we're using AI to improve the outcomes for you. Because number one is most of your clients aren't that far down that track on it as well. So they love hearing about people who are right on the cutting edge of business and they might learn things along the way. But two, I think there's a real sense of, I think it's good governance for businesses to actually start to declare where we're using AI as an effective tool. And so, with the sensitive information that we're doing, where we're using it, how we're using it, that kind of stuff, rather than we've just got this secret back room where we're cutting some costs.
Or even pretending we don't use it.
Or pretending. Yeah. And that's, people are, it's funny, image generation's been the classic, right? Like, so where we first had the 7 fingers and
this guy's been mucking around with it with me over the last week.
Yeah. And I mean, in the early days, you're blown away because your eyes have never seen it before. And then all of a sudden, once you start to see a few, human brain's pretty extraordinary. It can start to pick an AI image. And then we'll see another leap on AI and go, my God, look at it now. And then it takes you a month or two and now all of a sudden you can spot an AI. The world catches up to that stuff over time. So the images, that DALL-E was putting out 18 months ago blew your mind. Like you were just going, until the point where you went, now I can pick an AI image. It's a bit the same as AI copy and AI text, is that it doesn't take humans that long to figure that stuff out. Like, can you remember when we'd see an action film when CGI first came in and you'd walk out just go, whoa, that was incredible. And now you look back on them 10 years, 15 years later and you go, oh my God. Like I got a 17-year-old son and he go and watch an action film and I'll put on a classic and he just goes, like, that is just terrible. And I look at it now and go, it's terrible. But I think that's going to happen for businesses, right? So the more open that you can be around the use of it, I think it's going to be a big failing of a lot of businesses where they pretend that they're not using it and they try and dress it up as not being used. And I think that's a real curiosity for me, is that the openness around the use of that technology could actually become something that a customer or businesses trust you even more on.
I love that.
Wow. That was a good one.
We've covered so much ground there.
Yeah. I don't know. AI is one of those ones that it's just moving so fast that anyone who's making really specific predictions around it, even if you're an expert in it, I think I think it's a fool's errand. It's a bit like in money markets, anyone who's making long-term predictions, well, clock's right twice a day, right? So they just keep ringing out the same prediction, and eventually they'll get it right. And maybe in AI, because I don't think it's going to be a clock, I think it's linear, there's going to be a lot of people making predictions that aren't going to come true. So.
Yeah. Well, mate, thank you so much for coming on. We sat down with obviously your good friend Nan Baldwin, and after we finished recording that episode, we said to him, give us the one name of the person we need to sit down with on this podcast. And that was,
and he wasn't available.
That's right. And he went through 7 or 8 other people, and you couldn't get them, so he ended up with me. So yeah, that's right. So he's a champion. And honestly, he's been such a gift to the sporting community, but it's great to see more and more business owners that are tapping into what he brings to performance and performance under pressure. I think if we go back historically, the biggest business in the world was the military. When business took off, we used to learn a lot of lessons off military, and then that got replaced largely, probably from about the 70s onwards, by sport, because we looked at high performance in that and went, oh, can we bring that in? And I think it gets a bit hackneyed now where businesses, and they go, oh God, another sporting example. But any of those businesses who do that, I think it's really short-sighted, because sports is such a dynamic environment to learn. Like, there's such a short latency between the effort and seeing whether it worked or not. And even sports itself has gone through such a dynamic rediscovery where it came out of the classic, whoever works the hardest wins. Like that was sports 101. Like you just out grit, and we celebrated these examples of sports people who'd be out, training harder than everyone and doing all that kind of stuff, until a new emergence of a new athlete turned up. Like where we had a LeBron still playing, and we had a Tom Brady winning championships. Like that rewrote all the rules, didn't it? Where we went, hang on a minute, you're supposed to be flamed out by 28 or 30. And now we've got people doing extraordinary results. And why is it we keep breaking world records? Hang on. So we're producing better athletes, but the rules have changed. And I think there's something really in that for businesses as well, to pay attention to dynamic industries. And let's say sports and industry is we're learning things really quickly that can be employed into other business. And I think the recovery space, the active recovery, I'm seeing in sports, the connection between identity of individuals and longer, more sustainable results is really evident to me as a third party watching, because you're getting people achieve success for much longer in their careers, whereas you used to have these tales of athletes who it was kind of like they were slaying a dragon, or they were run away, or they had this impoverished childhood, or they'd done that stuff, and so they took that anger and they went to world champion, and then they flamed out and become catastrophic wrecks. And instead of being on the back page of the paper, they're now on the front page of the paper, right? And because they were trying to fill a hole. But now you're seeing these wonderful examples in sports of people who finish their sport career, and they're the type of people you go, wish my kid. So rather than it was, look at so-and-so, they won the championship, don't pay any attention to what they're doing in the rest of their life. But now what we see is you see these incredible athletes, like a Jess Fox and some of Nam's clients, they're just such rounded individuals at the end of their careers. There's something really in that. Imagine if we had business leaders who could achieve great success over a sustainable period of time, and instead of just leaving a trail of destruction behind them, they end up becoming a real doyen and an industry setter long after they actually stepped out of their field of endeavour. That's pretty cool.
I wonder if, because mental health's so widely spoken about now, which is awesome, if that's played into it. I think people recognise burnout and recognise probably the short bandwidth of someone who goes 200% for 5 years, rather than a LeBron or Ronaldo who sees, okay, I've got a 20-year career here. How do I plan that roadmap? Both physically, so I'm in good shape, mentally, so I'm ready to perform as well. If I guess the awareness of mental health has probably played a massive journey in that.
I think it's beyond mental health. I think it's actually, and mental health, when we talk about it as a label if we're talking about mental unwellness, is I think a lot of that is born from identity struggle. So I'm not quite sure who I am or complete in what I want to be. So I find something to fill the hole. I throw everything into it because I don't want to really stare into what that hole is. So all of a sudden I become a world champion, and then all of a sudden I've achieved 2 world championships, and then I still go, it's not enough. And so my question would be is that ones who achieve that longevity, they actually quickly work out that the sport isn't it. Like it's an endeavour. It's something that I can either love or be good at. But after that's long gone, who am I going to be out the other side? No, to be honest, I think that's one of the gifts that Naam Baldwin does extraordinarily well with his clients, is that often his athletes come to him after success rather than right at the start of their career. Is they'll have had success, they'll have won a world championship, and then they hit that spot of going, I'm still not comfortable or happy, and he actually helps them back on achieving success. But more than the world title or the premiership or that kind of stuff, he helps them be better people. I think there's something really in that, and for business is more work that can be done on that will prevent more things like burnout of their leaders, because they're not trying to fill a hole through the work. They're actually being more whole because of their work. That's a pretty cool place to be.
It's fair to say, mate, you've absolutely blown our minds in this last 90 minutes. Yeah, it's hard to put into words. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this one back a few times, I think, just to soak everything in. There's so much value, I think, if you are someone who's thinking about starting a business. If you're 2 years in, like we are, or if you are that $100 million business owner and you go, actually, I'm not proud of the business I build, or the business I build isn't going to get me to the next level. Every single person in that profile can take something massive out of this. And I know your clients are Pepsi's, McDonald's, but if someone is the everyday kind of person and wants to follow you for inspiration, if not fully working with you, where can they find you?
Oh, mate, just have a look at the work we're doing at Pragmatic Thinking, and you just Google search Pragmatic Thinking, you'll find us. And other than that, yeah, I just have my own personal website, darrenhill.com.au. I don't get on socials a huge amount these days. Most of my socials feeds is just filled with seeing tragically how the Parramatta Eels are going, or a little bit more enjoyably how the Sydney Swans are going. But until the final day of the grand final day, it seems to be lately. But so I'm not too noisy on the socials, but both of those areas, people can find some of the work we're doing. So.
Yeah, cool. And we'll grab those off you and we'll put them in the show notes as well, so people will know exactly where to find you. But thanks for coming on, mate. That was awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.